Good afternoon. Let's do some business right here. Mottek on Money. We get right down to business. Doing more at 4, right after Ben Shapiro, and just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek on Money, live on the air right here, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com, and your on-demand Mottek on Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Stocks finishing mostly lower today, with tech stocks leading the way lower, but the Dow managed another record high close of 243 points at 41,198. The Nasdaq taking a big hit today, down more than 500 points. It was the biggest daily percentage drop for the Nasdaq since December of 2022, with shares of semiconductor names getting hammered today. The Biden administration says it's considering stricter export restrictions to China, while President Donald Trump took aim at Taiwan's dominance in the chip manufacturing industry. We saw the Magnificent One NVIDIA, for example, getting hit today, down about 6.5%. In fact, the 7 big tech companies, the so-called Magnificent Seven, have shed about $1.1 trillion over the past 5 trading sessions. The Republican National Convention continues. Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, Donald Trump's newly minted running mate, making his national debut today as he will be delivering a primetime address on the 3rd day of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Joining us live now, Charlie Gasparino, senior correspondent at Fox Business Network, New York Post columnist, and New York Times best-selling author of 5 books. His newest book is Go Woke, Go Broke, The Inside Story of the Radicalization of Corporate America. Charlie, thank you very much for coming to the line here this afternoon.
Anytime, Frank.
Appreciate it very much. Congratulations on your new book and also your latest New York Post column headlined, "Here is Who's Worried About J.D. Vance in Business, From Wall Street to Silicon Valley." Very timely article that is in today's New York Post. He's on the spotlight tonight. Let's start with J.D. Vance. Tell us about your article and your assessment there.
Well, I mean, it's more than a coincidence that he got chosen. I mean, this is Donald Trump signaling the future of the Republican Party, and it's going to take a much more populist turn, more so than and his administration, if he should win, more so than in 2016. I mean, if you remember in 2016, Donald Trump surrounded himself with traditional conservatives, supply siders, you name it. I mean, the populist wing of the party, represented by people like Peter Navarro or Robert Lighthizer or Steve Bannon, their sort of voices were sort of muted to a certain extent because of that. That's not going to happen this time, I don't think. I mean, I think this is going to be a much more populist agenda in economics, especially in economics, than we've seen in the past. In the column, I go down the list, weaker dollar, Trump is actually talking about, weakening the dollar. He thinks it's too strong. Certain tax cuts, but not every tax cut, maybe muting some corporate taxes like carried interest deduction. I mean, read the article. I go down the line on where Vance would have his most impact. Maybe a breakup of big tech or more focus on that. I mean, this is going to be a different Republican Party. That's if they win. I tell you this. Here's the strange thing, Frank. The markets are pricing in both a Republican, Donald Trump winning, and the Republicans taking both houses of the Senate. There is a thought out there that these markets are getting way ahead of themselves. And and by the way, you could see it in certain sectors. You see it in energy price, energy stocks. You see it in financial stocks, all these sort of stocks that would do good in a Trump administration, theoretically, less regulation, and Republicans in Congress. You could have a black swan event if the Democrats pull out a win here. Now, Joe Biden is not in good health, as we could see. He's got COVID as we speak, yep. Right? He's postponing his campaign event. There's a good chance he's going to drop out. But the polls are still really tight. If they put in there 2 candidates that can effectively campaign, a Josh Shapiro maybe teaming up with Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, has a lot of negatives, but say what you want. She's got energy. She's a younger woman. This thing could get really tight. They could win, and that would be a black swan event for this market. Trust me, because I see all the traits. I mean, you could see it in the yield curve steepening. Yield curve, Treasury prices went up today, so the yield curve kind of flattened out a little bit. But since Trump looks like he was pulling ahead, it was a yield curve steepening because people are saying, well, it's going to be protectionism and maybe higher deficits because he likes to spend. I mean, you start changing those dynamics and people start losing money in the markets. That's kind of a black swanish thing. So I would just say that this race isn't over. If I follow markets, so I know people that are placing bets on the market based on Donald Trump winning. I'd be acting with caution, and I know it looks good, but you never know. This is a very divided country.
It looked like he was going to win in 2022, and you're right, a lot can happen between now and November. We're on the air live with Charlie Gasparino from Fox Business, also New York Post columnist. His latest column is about the guy in the spotlight tonight, J.D. Vance. By the way, Peter Navarro, a frequent guest on this show over the years when he was professor at UC Irvine and, of course, joined the Trump administration. He's also going to be in the spotlight, just coming out of prison today and blasting his experience. That'll be interesting, too, right?
Yeah, I mean, and, he probably will have a say in the new administration. And, he's one of those populist, tariff guys. So that's kind of like how people are looking at if Trump gets elected. There's going to be that trade that, the tariff trade will be interesting because while there's a lot of tout about how, tariffs will bring in X amount of money, what people forget is that if you start tariffing European goods on certain industries, well, guess what? They're going to tariff you. And that a lot of people think that took about a point off of, economists think that took a point off of GDP during the Trump years, that sort of trade war stuff. So, this is tough to gauge, but clearly the populists in the Republican Party are ascendant. But I still tell you, Frank, the polls look really tight. Joe Biden's had the worst couple of weeks of his presidency. The optics of Donald Trump surviving that assassination attempt are incredible. I mean, there's one of the most stirring things I've ever seen, him getting up with his fist raised. And a lot of people say, well, it's over. But, the polls say it's not over. So remember that just from if you're game planning this thing, the Democrats could get rid of Biden tomorrow and put in a really healthy candidate and maybe make up some ground here. And I'll tell you, my sources are telling me that there is incredible donor pressure to bring Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, onto the ticket. That they're going to him. He's kind of playing coy at this point. But the pressure is on to get him on the ticket, and if you could very well see in the next couple of days. I know I keep saying this. Everybody keeps saying this. Shapiro Harris ticket or Harris Shapiro ticket. It all comes down to Biden, of course. I speak to people who know Biden and say there's no way he's leaving. He doesn't care. He's cocooned. But I mean, I don't know how he gets through the day. I mean, he's not doing himself any favors. He's sick now. He gives these rambling interviews that seem to get worse by the minute. I mean, there's some inflection point here with his health, obviously, that, I don't know how he keeps going. So just keep that in mind when you think that this thing is all locked up.
See it tonight, read about it tomorrow, but hear it now on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC, live on the air with Charlie Gasparino from Fox Business, also New York Post columnist and best-selling author. Do you have another minute, Charlie? I want to ask you about your new book, which, of course, is getting a lot of attention. The new book is titled Go Woke, Go Broke, The Inside Story of the Radicalization of Corporate America. We see Microsoft today laying off its entire DEI team, by the way, so very timely conversation we're having here on that front. Tell us about the new book here, first of all.
Well, I try to – I mean, obviously, we're wokeness in the boardroom is past its peak. It's now it's the reversal going on, and my book gets into that. I mean, like the last sort of third of the book is the sort of unwokening of wokeism in the corporate boardroom. But I went into it thinking, like, how does American business embrace like policies that are anti-business? And how does American business become sort of an addendum or like an arm of the Democratic progressive movement? And I tried to trace it, and I tried to show how it manifests itself. It still manifests itself, despite people getting rid of their DEI departments. There's still that woke pressure in the boardroom. And I try to show the forces that created it, that led to its peakness, that occurred right around the time of the George Floyd killing back in 2020 during the COVID lockdowns. And what were the forces that started to reverse it? A lot of the forces was the American consumer saying enough. And I go through this. I spent a lot of time talking about BlackRock and Larry Fink. I interviewed him. I interviewed Mark Cuban. I've interviewed, Bernie Marcus of Home Depot, who's part of the counter revolution, anti-woke counter revolution. And I tried to, I tried to do a journalistic sort of expose of this issue. I interviewed people. I gave them their chance to comment. I interviewed George Soros, the spokesman, and let him at it. What we were writing, and I tried to be. I went out of my way to be fair on all sides. Obviously, it has a point of view. I think corporate wokeness and boardroom progressivism is very bad, but I tried to show it rather than tell it, and I did it through journalism.
Well, on the journalism front, others try, you succeed, Charlie. Congratulations on your new book, and thank you so much for coming to the line. I know you got to run here now, but hopefully we'll have more time on the air to talk more about the book and about everything else going on, and hopefully we can get you on more regularly here. Charlie Gasparino, senior correspondent at Fox Business Network, New York Post columnist, New York Times best-selling author of 5 books. Again, the new book is Go Woke, Go Broke, The Inside Story of the Radicalization of Corporate America. Charlie Gasparino, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Anytime, Frank. Call me anytime. Thank you. Great show.
Will do. Thank you very much. Charlie Gasparino, live with us here, coming to us from New York, live on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC. This is interesting. Former Trump White House official Peter Navarro, as I mentioned, a frequent guest on this program over the years, who helped lead the nation during the time of the COVID fight, during the time he was leading the efforts to get the nation's manufacturing mobilized. And, of course, Los Angeles is the largest manufacturing region in the United States. He was released from prison today, condemning the Biden administration for what he called the weaponization of the justice system, even as he pledged to offer a message of national unity when he speaks to the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. In his first interview since his release from a Florida prison for contempt of Congress, Peter Navarro telling the Associated Press he was just one example of what many on the right say is the Biden administration's use of the judiciary to punish its political enemies. In his words, Navarro's words, "I'm a small part of the bigger issue," Navarro said, referring to the oft-repeated claim by conservatives that during the President Joe Biden administration, the justice system has been used to hobble former President Donald Trump and those close to him. Again, according to Navarro, if we don't control the government will control us. Unquote from Navarro. Navarro, who served as the White House trade advisor under President Trump, was freed from custody after serving 4 months for refusing to cooperate with a congressional investigation into the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. The telephone interview with the AP took place as Peter Navarro was awaiting takeoff from a Florida airport for a trip to Milwaukee, where he was set to speak on the third night tonight of the Republican National Convention. Despite his echo of a common GOP refrain that the Biden administration has weaponized the judicial system to punish Trump and his allies, according to the AP, Navarro said he planned to offer a message of unity, a common theme among Republicans, in light of the assassination attempt on former President Trump last Saturday. So we'll be watching for Navarro as well as J.D. Vance, as we just talked about live on the air with Charlie Gasparino. Charlie Gasparino has written an article that's in today's New York Post focusing on J.D. Vance, a very interesting article, which we just talked about, focusing on J.D. Vance's role in a possible future administration, and nervousness by some on Wall Street as well as in the tech world. So take a look at that article in the New York Post today. Stock market having another big move on the upside. The Dow Jones Industrial Average leading on the upside today. The blue chip index has been on a tear lately and has settled at a record high close today of 243 points at 41,198. That, by the way, was the 22nd record high close of the year. The NASDAQ tumbled 512 points, finishing at 17,997. That was the biggest one-day drop for the NASDAQ since December 15th of 2022. The S&P 500 slipping 79 points at 5,588. We'll take a closer look at today's action on Wall Street. Gold hovering at a record high. I'll discuss gold later this hour with our Gold expert Barry Stupler here in Southern California, former president of the American Numismatic Association, and Stupler and Company here in Southern California in Woodland Hills. And we'll also talk business with a giant on the local business scene, and that is Mark Wilbur, who formerly headed up LA BizFed, founding member and former chair of the Los Angeles County Business Federation, also former associate dean of the USC Marshall School of Business, also with Employers Group here in Southern California. That and more straight ahead. Right now, let's get the latest on your ride this afternoon here on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KBC. Good afternoon. NASDAQ posting its worst day since 2022. The Dow, meanwhile, hitting a record high. The Dow closing up 244 points, settling at 41,198. The S&P 500 slipped 78 at 5,588. The NASDAQ tumbling 512 points at 17,997. The yield in the 10-year note back down to 4.16%. The price of gold at or near record highs today, right now up about $3 at $2,462.50 an ounce. We'll be talking gold later this hour. Among the movers today, shares of the Magnificent One, NVIDIA, tumbling more than $8, back to $117 and change. Apple down nearly $6 at $228.88. Microsoft down 6 cents at $443. And United Health down $24.41 at, United Health moved higher by $24.41. That stock continues on a roll here at $573.28. Something that Charlie Gasparino a few moments ago touched upon, President Biden testing positive for COVID today. According to the White House, the president, who was delivering speeches in Las Vegas, is experiencing mild symptoms. According to the White House press secretary, Biden will be returning to Delaware, where he will reportedly self-isolate and will continue to carry out all of his duties during that time. According to a White House statement, they say Biden is vaccinated and boosted. The White House will provide regular updates on the president's status as he continues to carry out the full duties of the office while in isolation, according to the White House statement. President Biden boarded Air Force One in Vegas. According to the White House, the president did not appear to be wearing a mask as he boarded the plane, and the doctor, Biden's doctor, said that the president came down with a runny nose and a non-productive cough this afternoon. Biden's symptoms remain mild with a normal temperature and respiratory rate and a 97% pulse oximetry reading, according to the doctor. Continue to follow that story, of course, and tonight's the big night, one of the big nights at the Republican National Convention. J.D. Vance will be speaking, and so will former Trump trade advisor Peter Navarro, longtime guest on this program, who, of course, served as a UC Irvine professor at the Paul Merage School of Business there at UC Irvine, and then ascended to the White House as one of President Trump's top advisors. Just spent 4 months in prison, and just came out today and will be speaking publicly at the convention this evening. Right now, let's get the latest on the news for you here. We'll be speaking to Mark Wilbur shortly on what's happening on the LA business scene. That and more straight ahead. But first, let's get the latest news on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. A lot of people in the business world talking about what's happening on the political front these days. Also, former President Trump says he would allow Fed Chair Powell to finish his term if reelected. That came out recently. Tonight, the former president's pick for vice president, and that is J.D. Vance, will be taking the spotlight at the Republican National Convention. We just talked to Charlie Gasparino about what he could mean for business across the country, especially as relates to tech companies, which took a big hit today. Let's bring in a giant on the local business scene here now, Mark Wilbur, who is the chairman of Employers Group, also former chair of the LA Business Federation, LA BizFed, founding member of LA BizFed, and also former associate dean of the USC Marshall School of Business. Mark Wilbur, thank you very much for coming to the line here this afternoon.
Thanks, Frank. Great to be on.
Well, we heard from California Representative Democrat Adam Schiff today. Became the highest profile Democrat to call for President Biden to drop his re-election bid, even as the party pushed ahead with plans for a virtual vote to formally make Biden its nominee in the first week of August. This is being discussed quite a bit by politicians here locally, as well as business folks. What is the buzz here among the business people you're talking to?
You know, this is a case of there's politics within the politics, as you know. And, two-thirds of the Democrats, I saw numbers pop today, estimated two-thirds of Democrat officials are urging him to, step down in this process. It's created such a distraction for the Democrat Party right now because, they should be focused in on, competing and getting ready for the election. But this thing just is not going away. He even made another mistake today at the podium. Now he's got COVID. And so, it's just such a hot mess right now. I'm not sure what's going to happen, quite frankly, with the disposition or the retention of Biden as a candidate.
All right, so we're on the air live with Mark Wilbur, and let me ask you this, Mark. What is the buzz here locally on where the economy is heading here? What is the outlook under possibly a new Trump administration, the outlook on inflation and all the big issues that have been covered during the Republican National Convention this week?
As you know, Frank, I talk to a lot of executive leaders all the time, and, there is high anticipation and hope that we get a new administration in Washington, D.C. and the White House. It's less about even the candidate. It's about change. It's about getting focus on jobs. It's about stopping the open border situation, which every single day you and I are talking about things about crime, fentanyl, all sorts of issues down across the border that has just unleashed a real problem into our country, and we need to get it under control for a while. We can always encourage more immigration. Those are things that we can, hit the gas pedal on anytime we want to. But I think we all would want to know who we're inviting to dinner. You don't just leave your front door open. I think you want to know who you're bringing in for dinner. And I don't think our country is any different. I think we just want to know who's coming in and have some due diligence in that process because our country is growing. We need immigration. We need people coming to our country. But the people most upset about immigration, Frank, are the immigrants who did it right, who did it the way they were supposed to do it. So it's very interesting to see the frustration in regular immigrants who waited their time and did all the right things.
Most certainly, and that's an excellent point. And regarding crime and homelessness, certainly pretty much at or near the top of the list of concerns these days for L.A. Residents as well as businesses. Mark Wilbur, what's the business buzz on those two important issues, crime and homelessness, now here in the Los Angeles area?
Well, gosh, Frank, the crime situation just doesn't seem to go away. It is a burgeoning issue. As you know, we had a whole bunch of retirements that have happened earlier this year. They're really struggling on hiring candidates into the police force. So we're running thin on the ability to enforce, even if we wanted to. So that's a huge issue for businesses, and I think that's where the frustration for a lot of Californians is that especially business owners and business leaders, is that there is no real enforcement in this process, and I think that's the real conundrum. The cost of that to businesses is extraordinary. And as we've talked about before from economics, where do you think those costs go? It just adds to the inflationary pressures we're already seeing. So a lot of places are opting to leave the state, close their businesses. I haven't seen this many boarded up businesses in our city since I can ever remember. Sadly, I've been alive for a long time, so I've got a pretty decent memory. And I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen this many boarded up sections of our city, businesses closed, restaurants closing, people leaving the state. It's just endless. And until somebody decides it's bad enough to get their head around it, it's just going to continue.
And, of course, 24 hours ago on this program, we were talking about Elon Musk's bombshell announcement that he'll be moving SpaceX to Texas. SpaceX headquarters out of Hawthorne, based here in Southern California, originated here, and then moving SpaceX to Texas, as well as X, formerly known as Twitter, out of the Bay Area to Texas. So that has got to be big news. What kind of a bombshell did that create there among the business movers and shakers you talked to tonight?
It's one of those things. And when I first saw it, I have to be honest, I really thought maybe it was positioning to negotiate with the state of California because he is a big enough employer and has a big enough footprint in the state. And on top of it, the quality of the employees in the state of California are extremely high. I mean, you're talking like some of the best engineering schools in the world, not just the country, in the world, are in our state. So, it's a great recruiting ground. It's great for all those things. But, Elon's already moved things out of our state. So it's not a total shocker that, he would be wanting to consolidate these businesses into a business-friendly state. Gosh, I would hate to see him go. It'd be a real blow to the South Bay, a real blow to Los Angeles for sure. We used to be the dominant force in space. I mean, all the engineering, all of the companies that you used to see, the Teledynes and the TRWs and all of these companies. So many of these businesses have left our state. There's still some footprints around. You still have Raytheon. You still have a few others, but their footprint is smaller. I mean, we've seen Nissan go. We've seen Toyota go. We've seen just endless big companies go. And these are long-term employment driving companies. And that really hurts our state. When you have things like that unplugged from your economy, you don't just say, oh, well, we've got entrepreneurs and we're going to fill that gap. No, that doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. And not for those legacy jobs that big established companies have in their footprint. Entrepreneurs replace entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs come and go. Some are successful, some fail. You want them all to turn out to be, a Facebook, a Honda, or, all those different kinds of businesses that are in our state. Honda still has a decent footprint here, but most everybody else is gone from the car industry. It's very frustrating.
Certainly, and Elon Musk making that announcement days after he endorsed President Trump for president, by the way. So heading to Texas, lock, stock, and barrel at this point. And we're on the air live with Mark Wilbur. And another big story certainly impacting the labor world. Microsoft making a big announcement, laying off its diversity equity team as fired staff complained diversity ideals were no longer business critical. Microsoft firing its diversity equity and inclusion team, leading the program's leader to slam the company's changing business needs. What's your reaction to that big news here?
Well, Frank, the last 20 years of my career, I've been highly focused in the human capital, HR part of the world. And DEI isn't going to disappear. I mean, DEI isn't, just being, completely unplugged, but there's a balance. It's like all things. There's a pendulum. Right now, like on crime, we've got way too much crime and we need to get that pendulum pushed back. DEI and its implementation during the COVID years, I think a lot of business leaders have, gone on record that it's gone too far and that it's making companies really inefficient in how they're trying to do these programs and how they're trying to manage them. And when you have companies that are struggling to get by, and, again, you're trying not to shutter your businesses and things like that, you've got to find a balance. I mean, equity. I mean, Snap just paid a major fine about regarding an equity decision, because of their situation and some of their practices. So, equity isn't going away. Diversity isn't going away. We live in Los Angeles, Frank. It's one of the most diverse cities on the planet. So, diversity is incredibly important. And so it's not like it's going away. I just think people are starting to put pencil to paper and start to say, hey, how is this helping our business? Is it really helping our hiring process? Is it helping with retention? Is it helping with our managing of our business? And like all areas of a business, it's not getting sheltered anymore. It's either going to show that it's a contributing factor to the business or it's not. So I think Microsoft made a decision to trim it back significantly and probably address it in other ways. As they were very clear to say, they still remain committed to diversity and inclusion, and I absolutely expect them to. But it's just how they go about it is different, because a lot of companies really threw a ton of money at it and they really can't substantiate it on the bottom line.
Excellent assessment there, as always, Mark. Thank you very much for that. And unfortunately, we're out of time, but maybe we can both send congratulations to Robert Iger and Willow Bay, who have acquired the Angel City Football Club and the landmark women's sports deal announced today.
Yeah.
Of course, Willow Bay, the head of the Annenberg School for Communication at USC, the dean of the USC Annenberg School, and her husband, Walt Disney CEO Bob Iger, agreeing to acquire Angel City Football Club in a deal valuing the club at $250 million. Congratulations to from your newest best friends, you two. And
Yeah.
Mark, I know you're a big soccer fan, so we'll get to see them out there. Thank you very much for that thorough
You bet.
assessment, as
Thanks for
always,
having me on,
daily
Frank.
business scene. Thank you very much. Mark Wilbur, Chairman of Employers Group, also former Associate Dean of the USC Marshall School of Business, and a founding member and former Chairman of LA BizFed. Live with us here, Mottek on Money, 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC. Gold has a new shine, hitting record highs this week. In fact, right now hovering at or near record highs. Silver's also been along for the ride lately, but off its record, well off its all-time high, around $30 an ounce here at the moment. Joining us live now is Barry Stepler. Oh, we're going to get Barry hopefully on the line here very, very shortly to talk about gold and silver and precious metals. So we're awaiting his arrival here in just a few moments from now, we hope. We're seeing the cryptos also in focus. Let's take a look at some of those names here. Bitcoin, for example, at the moment down about 200 at 64,328. We see Ethereum down 9 at 3,406, and Doge at 12 cents. Coinbase more likely to see SEC action over crypto accounting after regulator Ding's arrival for the same practice. That headline coming across the wires this afternoon. We're, of course, following what's happening in the crypto world very closely. This on a day in which the NASDAQ took a very big hit. We didn't see much of a reaction, though, in the cryptos, and the observation's been made on this program that cryptos appear to be somehow correlated to the NASDAQ. We're talking on a day in which the NASDAQ has tumbled more than 500 points at the close, down 512 at 17,997. The S&P 500 slipping 79 points today at 5,588. The Dow closing higher at a record high close today, up 244 points at 41,198. The yield in the 10-year note is eased to 4.16%. That's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates. And don't be surprised when we get the weekly survey from mortgage giant Freddie Mac that we'll see an easing of those fixed-rate mortgage rates when we get the survey tomorrow. That's certainly good news for the folks in real estate and for those who are trying to buy a home, with affordability being a huge issue. Mortgage rates falling to the lowest level in 4 months, according to the latest reading today, while refinances have jumped 15%, according to another report we got today. But the authoritative Freddie Mac survey comes out every Thursday morning. We'll be looking for the latest on that. Taking a look at where we stand right now with the precious metals, let's bring up what we can here now on gold, for example, at $5 at $2,464.90 an ounce. And silver, the price of silver today, let's bring that one up, closed up 20 cents today at $30.58 an ounce. Looks like year to date, silver's had quite a run, moving up by about 28% so far this year. The price of gold also has been hitting record highs lately, and it's up, about 20% for the year. Gold reaching a record high at $2,484 today, and looks like after hitting a record $2,484, according to some analysts, gold faces some resistance with a potential bearish pattern, yet retains a bullish outlook above key support levels. Gold continued to advance to a new trend high of $2,484 before encountering some resistance. Sellers taking back control from that high and have set gold up with a potential bearish shooting star candlestick pattern, according to FX Empire. Underlying strength remains, however, as today is on track to complete a narrow range day near the highs of the record high we hit yesterday. Strength indicated by the breakout was confirmed at the close yesterday above the previous record high of $2,450 an ounce. So we are watching the precious metals very closely. We're watching the gold chains as well as the blockchains very closely here on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC. President Biden has tested positive for COVID ahead of his speech to a conference in Vegas. Looks like he's canceled that speech. According to some of the other headlines today, House Democrats want to stop early Democratic National Committee efforts to nominate Biden before the party convention. And we continue to follow the drama there. And tonight's a big night at the Republican National Convention, where former President Trump's pick as his running mate, J.D. Vance, will be delivering a speech. And also former Trump advisor Peter Navarro is scheduled to make an appearance as well at the convention. He was released from prison today. Peter Navarro, a familiar voice and name here on this program over the years, the former UC Irvine business professor at the Paul Merage School of Business. Of course, he became a trade advisor to President Trump during the administration and also became a manufacturing czar during the COVID crisis. The former White House official Peter Navarro released from prison today, condemning the Biden administration for what he called the weaponization of the justice system, even as he pledged to offer a message of national unity when he speaks at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. He did talk to the Associated Press earlier today, his first interview since his release from a Florida prison for contempt of Congress. He told the AP he was just one example of what many on the right say is the Biden administration's use of the judiciary to punish its political enemies. Peter Navarro, of course, may be back on this program at some point. We'll hear it straight from him. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang, and I'll be doing more at 4 tomorrow afternoon right here. Mottek on Money on 790 KBC.
Welcome to Talkville, the ultimate Smallville rewatch podcast. Well, let's get into season 4, episode 21, Forever.
Is there a button we can hit that just skip?
I know. What I'm surprised about, and I don't think there's anything he could have done, but James Marshall directed this, and he's directed so many great episodes.
It's collecting the paycheck.
This would have been an epic episode if somehow it was Lex Luthor's high school experience at graduation.
Binge seasons 1 through 4 of Talkville before season 5 begins, wherever you listen.